Democracy. It's the reason we're all here today, but what does it actually mean? Democracy is a strange word, some would argue an undefinable word, an impossible word. So how do we actually recreate that within society? Some would say that Britain is a democracy. I would agree on the whole part. There are some sections of this country which are amazingly democratic and they suit our needs. But are we a fundamental democracy? The word democracy originates from ancient Greece, demos kratos, people power, quite literally. And that raises the question, in the UK, do we have people power? Can the people actively execute their own rights? I don't believe so. So the current situation in our nation is based on two things: how we form our government and how our government operates. How we form our government is via elections. In the UK, in terms of the national vote, we use a system called FPTP, first past the post. It's a system which is very majoritarian and doesn't really factor in all rights and all votes. A lot of votes are naturally wasted. They are free, fair, regular, open to all. If you're over the age of 18 in this country, other than a few things such as being imprisoned, you have the right to vote. That is a noble thing to have in the modern world, considering that only 120 countries out of 193 are recognised as democracies. The style of government in this country is also very important. We have at the top our figurehead, in my opinion, a dictator, the monarch. Below that we have our three separate branches, the executive, the judicial and the legislative. Underneath that we have the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and in their opinion, underneath that we have you. We have the founding blocks of this nation. I'm not going to talk about the judicial or the executive today, but I'm going to focus on the legislative and how that impacts you. But to begin with, I'm going to discuss the elections. Now, I've got four made-up parties behind me: the squares, the circles, the triangles and the swirls. And imagine if we were to recreate this vote across all 650 constituencies. 24% of the vote went to the circles, the triangles and the swirls, and 28% went to the squares. These were only a couple more votes in each constituency, but they pipped them over the top. It was only one or two extra votes that allowed the squares to win every vote. Therefore, nationally, they only got 28% of the vote of shares, and then they had 100% of the seat share. That is incredibly discriminatorial in terms of the squares over-dominating British politics. There is also the aspect within this country of referendums. Going back to ancient Greece in 520 BC, there was ordinary citizens. If you were over the age of 20, male, and a freeman, most importantly, you had the ability to stand in the city squares, hear great speeches from orators, and then make your decision that would impact your life. We do not have that in this country. We use referendums, and I would argue very unprofessionally, as do other European countries such as the Swiss. The Swiss use them a lot more frequently and for more everyday topics. We typically use them for the more major and the typically constitutional theories. But are they professionally used again? We introduced the Fixed Term Parliament Act of 2011 and there was no referendum. When we removed all the hereditary peers, excluding 92 in the early 21st century, there was no referendum. The reason for that being is that there was no political issue behind it. There was no split government. When we decided to enter the European Union, there was a referendum. That is because the government couldn't make up their mind. The Prime Minister didn't want to split his party and cause himself to potentially lose power. That occurred when we decided to leave the European Union as well. Therefore, they pushed the decision onto you. You didn't have a lot of information. That is the nature of a referendum. And the information that you got was highly manipulated. And that also brings me on to the separation of powers. James Madison believed that the United States should have a system by which the three branches, the judicial, the executive and the legislative, should be separated. They should have checks and balances monitoring them to make sure they were being fair and representing the people. In the country, to an extent, we don't have that. We do have checks and balances. The House of Commons balances the House of Lords and vice versa. Now the figure on the board behind me, 1,450, that is the number of people who can legally make laws in this country. Does anybody know what the second percentage is? It's the percentage of people that we voted for. In a democracy, in the foundation of democracy, only 45% of the people who can make laws were elected. That is, the monarch, 799 current peers, and 650 MPs. That's a disgrace. So, how do we regain our power and our freedom? Firstly, we take the House of Lords. The House of Lords last year cost £93.1 million to the taxpayer, £93.1 million to the unelected, 92 of which were there by birthright, and 26 of them are there based upon their religion. Instead, I believe we should replace it with a sortition chamber, a people's chamber. Similar to how we use the jury system in this country, we take 250 ordinary members of the electoral roll, we house them in London or Birmingham or any major hub of people, and we get them to vote on the matters that the House of Lords have decided in the last 2 weeks. In between the 5-year period between electing our MPs, there is nothing to stop them ruining our lives. I could vote for one candidate and then 5 years down the line completely regret my decision. And the only way to stop that is by stopping them in the meantime. If we take these 250 people, yes, some of them are going to be incredibly intelligent, most of them PhDs, but there are also going to be some of them that aren't exactly the most educated. They could be schooled, but not educated. Therefore, in terms of assessing this information and making sure it is productive, each party, in my opinion, that has a certain number of votes or a certain number of seats should be able to forward witnesses who can give testimony, who can give evidence to these ordinary people and go, actually, this is the best plan for you, independently. Because these 250 people, they will not have the whip following them. They will not be rewarded if they vote a certain way. They will be impacting their own lives. They can go, this is a bill that's going to hurt my family. This is a bill that's going to hurt my neighbour. I'm going to stop it. And vice versa, they can also believe, this is a great bill that is going to forward my country. Let's vote for it. I believe that the 250 people in this chamber are going to really forward our people power, our demos kratos. And secondly, we abolish the monarchy. It's a very tough stance. But I believe that Queen Elizabeth acts very constitutionally. She's a very good monarch. She acts as the figurehead for our nation better than some other national leaders. And on the board behind me are the 3 main reasons that we maintain the monarchy. The monarchy provides continuity in a rapidly changing environment. That's true. But who currently wants continuity? Who likes the idea of food banks? Who likes the idea of austerity? Who likes these different ideas that we all have different opinions on? The monarch represents that continuity. There is nothing that she can do to prevent us from being harmed in this country, legally. But of course, she also has the capability of ruining the constitution. The monarchy is only constitutional. It is only theoretical. But would you be pleased if I was to tell you that the Queen has just stormed into the House of Commons and said, "Mr. Speaker, I denounce this government"? None of us would. This is an ordinary citizen acting outside of her boundaries. And thirdly, the monarchy brings in a lot of money. Yes, ultimately. 785 million per year on average. 285 of that came last year from the Queen and the royal family paying income tax, the other £500 million from tourism. That is a big figure. That brings in the taxpayer nearly £1 billion per year. But ultimately, it actually equals about £3.80 per taxpayer per year. I know that I spent that amount on my breakfast this morning, and I know that if I can protect my children and I can protect my country and my constitution, I'm more than willing to have that reminder over me. I'm more than willing to go, that £3.80 this year, I know that I did good. I know that I removed a monarch. I'm willing to sit in this people's chamber, and I'm also willing to work together. Going back to ancient Greece, there were 500 members in the council, 50 members in the committee, and the president. Were any of them elected? No. They were chosen randomly, similar to the People's Chamber, not to forward their own agenda, but to maintain the cohesion of Athens and make sure that the nation worked. That is something we should be striving for. We shouldn't be striving to further our own goals. We should be striving to further our neighbours' goals. We should be striving to build a country that works for everyone. And unfortunately, this country does not currently do that. So, how do we regain our power and our freedom? Firstly, we introduce the People's Chamber. We place power directly in the hands of the people, similar to the jury service. You're going to get called up for 2 weeks, you're going to have your expenses paid, you're going to have a good time, but you're also going to make lasting change to this country that you can be proud of. And secondly, we abolish the monarchy, we introduce the freedom tax, and we make sure that we have protected our nation and our democracy for our children for time immemorial. These should be the lasting impressions that we leave for our children, because we should not be leaving behind this current society, because it is a society that hurts no one, but it helps no one. We should be creating a society that benefits us all. Thank you.